This podcast has been produced to look specifically at the assessment guidelines for the Consolidating Practice module for third year Child Branch students. As you're no doubt aware, you've got one piece of assessed coursework for this module. It's not due until the 8th of July, and that might seem quite a long way off. But bearing in mind you've got placement and everything else going on, it's worth beginning to make your plans just now. It's the last piece of coursework you'll hand in, so it might be difficult to motivate yourself, especially as you've probably got most of your mind on upcoming registration. But I think one thing to bear in mind is that the contents of this assessment, what it's actually asking you to look at, is very much about becoming that registered nurse, so hopefully that can keep you motivated.
One of the most important things to bear in mind in planning and writing your essay is to make sure that you're answering the question. It's an easy way to lose marks if you go off topic, and there are a number of ways that you can make sure that you do actually answer the question that you've been set. Start by asking yourself a series of questions. So where does the topic fit into other things that you've learned on the course so far? And think what the specific angle might be. There's lots of really useful information available on the ELS website and on our own Study Smart pages that can help you. When you have your list of questions that you've written about the essay question you have to answer, make sure that you make some notes. So go back to the lecture notes to think about where topics link together, and also to core text that you might have used in the past. Think about using some new resources as well though to expand your reading and to fill in the gaps in your knowledge. Make sure you write down initial reflections and also take a critical approach to the question. For example, are there any assumptions that you should investigate? Also think about what you already know and where you can go to find out more information. It is important to stay focused though, and keeping the question around you will help you to do this.
You've been given very clear assessment guidelines, so do spend some time reading them, and there's a very specific question to answer. So you're to critically examine the potential challenges facing the newly qualified children's nurse. The assessment guidelines highlight what the markers want from you. In particular, I think what strikes me is that they expect you to have very clear structure. So think about your introduction, your main body, that there's a clear flow to everything, and then a conclusion. They also highlight that this is to be a critical assessment, so think about that when you're actually planning and writing. They also emphasise that it's not just about looking at what the difficulties of transition are, it's about recommendations to ease that transition. They also highlight that you shouldn't only be looking at current research, but a mixture of research and policy. And I always think it's worth bringing in theory if there is any. And then they also highlight correct referencing. So if you make sure that you're meeting all of those things, if you've got good referencing, you've got a clear structure, you've taken a critical approach, then you should be marked very highly. So at level 9 or third year, it's really important that you're critical. I'm sure you've heard an awful lot of this by now. So make sure that you're taking a critical approach to unpicking the question, to the research that you undertake. Think critically when you're planning and when you're going through the drafting and writing stage. Are you demonstrating to the marker that you've taken a critical approach?
As we've said, this is the last large piece of work that you have to do before registration. So try breaking it down into manageable tasks if you're having problems planning and getting started. Another good way to actually get started is to read the paper that the initial quote has come from, to think about the context, think about other pieces of research, and to get you thinking about the particular topic. There's also another few things that you might like to think about in terms of planning and writing your assessment. Be aware, for example, of the word count. Remember to think critically and also to write as clearly and concisely as possible. You'll be talking about fairly complex theories, procedures, policies, so the more clear and concise you can be, the easier it will be for the reader to understand your argument. Also be very aware of linking theory to practice and use your experiences, but in a structured and evidence way that uses lots of references to back up your observations. In the same way that it's useful to keep the assessment guidelines around you to make sure you're answering the question, also keep referring to the marking matrix to make sure that you're responding to the requirements of the actual assessment itself. For example, the 40% weighting for application to practice. Also remember to be specific and selective in the resources that you use and how you actually use them, so again being very critical, and use the module reading list and lecture notes to help you to think about what resources you should go to in the first place and then to expand your reading too. If there's any aspect of planning or writing the essay that you'd like to chat through, then please feel free to get in touch either by email or telephone.